Conclusion: indoctrinating children before their brains are fully developed constitutes a form of child abuse, harms their intellectual and emotional growth, undermines their autonomy, and imposes belief without informed consent.
Neurology guiding paths where the mysteries unfold. Heritage foundation roots entrenched in the past, but I'm inhaling the present, making these questions last. Question everything and everyone, truth in every tone. Puppet masters all around, time to break the yoke. Breathe it in my lungs, thoughts soaring free. Unveil the hidden lies, perceive the reality. Ah.
Introduction 1. The discussion on ethics, morality, and the role of religion often encounters resistance, particularly from those who may feel their belief or lifestyles are being challenged. This essay aims to preemptively address and debunk common fallacious arguments against the ethical critiques of wealth, power, and equality. It will employ logical and ethical reasoning to reinforce the argument that ethical behavior is the only morally sound way to act. Contrasting this with the teachings of Western religion, which often prioritize spirituality over ethics, additionally, it will explore how Christian beliefs subconsciously devalue ethics, environmental care, animal welfare, and argue that diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI) align with the teachings of Jesus. Finally, it will present scientific evidence on human antiquity to challenge the literal interpretations of religious texts. Part 2. Consequentialism is an ethical theory that determines the rightness or wrongness of actions based on their outcomes. From this perspective, the existence of a rich person in a world with poverty raises significant ethical concerns. This essay will argue that it is impossible for a rich person to be ethical as their wealth is intrinsically tied to the existence of poverty. The common defense that the wealthy donate to charity will be critically examined, revealing it as an insufficient justification for the ethical disparities their wealth perpetuates. Consequentialism Consequentialism asserts that morality of an action is judged by its consequences. Actions that result in positive outcomes for the greatest number of people are considered ethical. Conversely, actions leading to the harm or suffering are deemed unethical. While applying this framework to wealth and distribution, the existence of rich individuals directly contributes to the persistence of poverty and inequality, thus producing negative consequences for society. Part 3. Wealth and poverty, an inextricable link. By definition, wealth is a relative measure. A person is considered rich because they possess significantly more resources than others. This disparity creates a socioeconomic divide.
It's over, Anakin! I have the high ground! You underestimate my power! Don't try it!
Where the accumulation of wealth by a few necessitates the impoverishment of many. Consequently, the very existence of a rich person implies the existence of poor individuals, as wealth cannot exist in isolation without comparison to those with less. Part 4. The fallacy of charitable donations. One common defense of the ethicality of rich individuals is their contribution to charitable causes. Figures like Mr. Beast are often cited as examples given their publicized donations. However, this defense is fundamentally flawed for several reasons. Part 5. Minimal impact. While individuals may donate substantial sums to charity, these donations are often minuscule compared to their overall wealth. For instance, a millionaire donating a few $1,000s is equivalent to a middle income person donating a few cents. The impact of such donations on systemic poverty is negligible, as they do not address the root cause of inequality. Part 6. Motivations behind donations. Charitable donations by wealthy individuals often serve ulterior motives, such as enhancing their public image or securing tax benefits. These actions are not driven by genuine altruism, but by a desire to maintain and further their own wealth and status. Thus, the consequences of these donations are primarily self serving rather than genuinely beneficial to those in need. Part 7. The inefficiency of charities. Many charities operate inefficiently, with a significant portion of donations absorbed by administrative costs and overheads. As a result, the actual benefit to the intended recipients is often minimal. The inefficiency undermines the ethical argument for charitable donations, as the positive outcomes are diluted by the operational shortcomings of these organizations. Part 8. Addressing common fallacies. Fallacy 1. Wealth and charity justify ethical standing. One common argument is that wealthy individuals can maintain ethical standing through charitable donations. However, this is a fallacious reasoning known as the appeal to charity.
I'm like a janitor. I'm a full-on rapist, Africans, dyslexics, children, that sort of thing.
While philanthropy can alleviate some suffering, it does not address the systemic issues that perpetuate inequality. Ethical behavior requires actions that lead to sustainable and equitable outcomes for all, not just temporary relief through donations. The existence of extreme wealth amidst poverty indicates a fundamental ethical failing, as true morality seeks to eliminate, not merely mitigate, suffering. Fallacy 2. Capitalism rewards hard work and talent. Another argument is that capitalism is a fair system that rewards hard work and talent. This meritocracy fallacy ignores the structural inequalities that favor the wealthy and perpetuate poverty, vis-a-vis Fallout the show. The ethical perspective demands a critical examination of these structures and advocates a more just distribution of resources. The claim that capitalism is inherently fair fails to recognize the ethical implications of a system that allows vast disparities in wealth and power. Fallacy 3. Religious teachings provide a moral framework. Some argue that Western religion, particularly Christianity, provide a sufficient moral framework. However, Western religion often emphasizes spirituality over ethics. Spirituality focuses on personal salvation and a relationship with the divine, while ethics concerns itself with right and wrong behavior towards others. Christianity, as practiced by many, often teaches that faith alone ensures salvation, which can lead to disregard for ethical actions in this life. Part 9. The ethical deficiencies of certain Christian beliefs. Disregard for ethics, the planet, and animals. A significant issue with some Christian teachings is the belief in salvation through faith alone. This can lead to subconscious disregard for ethical behavior, environmental stewardship, and animal welfare. The idea that saying certain words or performing certain rituals guarantees entry into heaven can negate the perceived need for ethical conduct.
The swish and flick. Everyone? The swish and flick.
This belief system can perpetuate harm and injustice, as individuals may feel absolved from the consequences of their actions simply by professing faith. The belief in automatic salvation can result in environmental neglect and exploitation of animals, as the long term consequences of these actions are deemed irrelevant. This perspective is fundamentally at odds with ethical principles that prioritize the well being of all living beings and the planet. Ethical behavior demands a commitment to sustainability and compassion, values that are often overshadowed by the focus on spiritual salvation. Part 10. Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, DEI, and the teachings of Jesus. DEI principles align closely with the teachings of Jesus, who advocated for love, compassion, and justice for all people. Jesus' message was one of inclusion and care for the marginalized, which is fundamentally compatible with the goals of DEI. Arguing against DEI on religious grounds is therefore inconsistent with the ethical teachings of Jesus.
That was by design.
Jesus' ministry was marked by his outreach to the oppressed, the poor, and the marginalized. His teachings emphasize the importance of treating all individuals with dignity and respect, regardless of their social status. DEI initiatives seek to uphold these values by promoting inclusivity and fairness in all aspects of society. By embracing DEI, we can honor the true ethical teachings of Jesus and work towards a more just and equitable world. Part 11. Scientific evidence and the challenge to religious literalism. Human antiquity. Scientific evidence, such as studies on human migration and DNA analysis, have proven that humans are over 1 million years old. This evidence directly contradicts the literal interpretations of religious texts that suggest a much younger age for humanity. For instance, a recent study published in the Smithsonian magazine reveals that early humans migrated out of Africa multiple times over hundreds of thousands of years. This scientific understanding challenges the validity of religious claims about the age of the earth and humanity, urging a reevaluation of beliefs based on empirical evidence. This recognition of human antiquity highlights the importance of integrating scientific knowledge with ethical reasoning. By acknowledging the vast history of humanity, we can better understand our place in the world and our responsibilities towards one another and the planet. This perspective encourages a more informed and ethical approach to addressing contemporary challenges, moving beyond the limitations of religious literalism. Part 12. Robin Hood ethics and the fight for equality and the oppression of the advocates. Robin Hood ethics represents the moral stance that wealth should be redistributed to achieve equality and justice in society. This principle challenges the entrenched power dynamics that uphold the status quo, where wealth equates to power and power ensures control. The advocates for equality are often met with resistance and oppression because those in power recognize that their influence is inherently tied to their wealth. This essay will explore how this dynamic manifests, why socialism is often mischaracterized as communism by the right, and how misrepresentation serves the interest of the wealthy elite. Furthermore, it will highlight the ethical contrast between the teachings of Jesus and the practice of those who profess to follow him yet uphold systemic inequality. Part 13. Wealth, power, and control. In modern society, wealth is a fundamental source of power. Those who possess significant financial resources can influence political decisions, shape public opinion, and control economic activities. This power buys control over societal norms and consequently the morals that govern behavior. The wealthy elite are invested in maintaining the structure because it legitimizes their privileged status and secures their interest. Part 14. Oppression of equality advocates. Those who fight for equality, such as socialist and other progressive movements, threaten this power dynamic. By advocating for the redistribution of wealth, they challenge the very foundation upon which the elite's power is built. As a result, these advocates are often oppressed, marginalized, and vilified.
1,000 people in an iron box. 18 years I've hated the train. 18 years I've waited for this moment.
I belong to the front. You belong to the tail. Know your place. Keep your place.
Those bastards in the front, you think they own us?
We'll be different when we get there.
This is disorder.
We're going to the front. Open the gate.
Precisely 74% of you shall die.
This is your destiny.
The resistance they face is a testament to the entrenched interests to the wealthy, those who understand that their influence is precarious and dependent on the perpetuation of economic disparities. Part 15. The mischaracterization of socialism and communism. A common tactic employed by the right is to conflate socialism with communism. Despite their distinct differences, socialism advocates for collective ownership and democratic control over resources, while communism seeks a classless, stateless society. The right portrays both as equally threatening. This misrepresentation is strategic, aiming to invoke fear and distrust among the public. By blurring these distinctions, the right effectively defends the status quo, where wealth remains concentrated in the hands of the few. Part 16. Subconscious recognition of threat. This tactic often reveals a subconscious recognition among the wealthy that true socialism would undermine their privileged status. Even if they lack the intelligence or skills to theoretically required to earn their wealth, they cling to the possibility of becoming or remaining rich. The defense of capitalism, therefore, is not just about economic ideology, but also about preserving the possibility of wealth accumulation and the power it brings. Part 17. The right to wealth. Many among the wealthy elite believe it is their inherent right to be rich. This belief is often justified through meritocratic arguments, suggesting that wealth is a reward for hard work and talent. However, this perspective ignores the structural inequalities and advantages that enable wealth accumulation. It also overlooks the ethical implications of maintaining such disparities, which are contrary to the principles of justice and equality. Part 18. Jesus and the ethics of equality. The ethical teachings of Jesus present a stark contrast to the practices of many who claim to follow him. Jesus chose a life of poverty and advocated for the marginalized and the oppressed. By modern standards, his teachings align more closely with socialist ideals of equality and justice. However, many religious followers who support systemic inequality fail to recognize this juxtaposition. Religion, in this context, can inhibit critical thinking and perpetuate ignorance about the ethical inconsistencies between their beliefs and actions. Part 19. Religion as a barrier to critical thinking. Religion often discourages critical examination of its doctrines and the societal structures it supports. This lack of critical thinking allows for the perpetuation of myths that justify inequality and hinder progress towards a more equitable society. The uncritical acceptance of wealth and power as divinely ordained prevents meaningful dialogue about the ethical implications of economic disparities. Part 20. Conclusion. From a consequentialist perspective, the existence of a rich person is fundamentally unethical. The wealth of a few is intrinsically linked to the poverty of the many, and charitable donations by the wealthy do not sufficiently mitigate the negative consequences of this disparity. True ethical behavior requires actions that lead to positive outcomes for all, and as long as wealth is concentrated in the hands of a few, such outcomes remain unattainable. Therefore, it is ethically impossible for a rich person to exist without perpetuating the very conditions consequentialism deems harmful. Ethics, grounded in logical and moral reasoning, is the only way to ensure true moral actions. Western religion, particularly Christianity, often emphasizes spirituality over ethics, leading to a disregard for ethical conduct, environmental care, and animal welfare. Common fallacies defending wealth and capitalism fail under ethical scrutiny, as they ignore the systemic inequalities that perpetuate suffering. The principles of DEI align with the teachings of Jesus, who advocated for inclusion and justice. Scientific evidence on human antiquity further challenges the literal interpretations of religious texts, urging a more informed and ethical approach to understanding our past and shaping our future. By prioritizing ethics over spiritual dogma, we can work towards a more just and equitable society. 21. Cult comparison, logical comparisons, modern Christianity and cult characteristics. Centralized authority, modern Christianity. Many Christian denominations emphasize adherence to the teachings of a central religious authority, such as the Pope in Catholicism or influential pastors in evangelical churches. Followers are expected to accept doctrinal teachings without question, often disregarding critical examination or dissents. Cults typically have a characteristic leader who wields significant control over the beliefs and behaviors of members. This authority figure is often seen as infallible, and questioning their authority is discouraged or punished. Comparison. Both systems rely on centralized figures whose teachings and directives are followed unquestioningly by the adherents, stifling individual critical thought. 2. Exclusive truth claims. Modern Christianity. Many Christians believe that their faith holds the exclusive truth about God's salvation and morality, often viewing other religions as false or inferior. This exclusivity can lead to an insular community mindset where members are encouraged to avoid outside influences. Cults claim to possess exclusive access to truth or salvation, convincing members that they have found the only path to enlightenment or safety. Members are often isolated from outside perspectives to maintain control over their beliefs. Comparison. Both systems promote the idea that they alone possess ultimate truth, fostering an environment of exclusion and insularity. Emotional manipulation, modern Christianity. Emotional experiences such as guilt, fear of damnation, and ecstatic worship are often used to reinforce beliefs and encourage conformity. Rituals and sermons frequently emphasize emotional appeal over rational discourse, creating a strong emotional bond to the faith. Cults use emotional manipulation to create dependency, employing fear, guilt, and intense communal experiences to solidify loyalty. Members are often subjected to emotionally charged environments that discourage critical thinking. Comparison. Both use emotional manipulation to strengthen adherence and discourage questioning, prioritizing emotional responses over rational analysis. Social inclusion, modern Christianity. Some Christian communities encourage social isolation by promoting insular activities and discouraging interactions with non believers. Members have urged to avoid secular environments and relationships that could challenge their faith. Cults often enforce social isolation by limiting members' contact with outsiders, including family and friends. This isolation reinforces dependence on the group and prevents exposure to dissenting views. Comparison. Both create social environments that limit interactions with outside perspectives, reinforcing group cohesion and control over members. Echo chambers. 5. Behavioral control. Behavioral control. Modern Christianity. Christian teachings often include strict behavioral guidelines dictating aspects of personal life, such as sexuality, gender, roles, and daily practices. Deviations from these norms can result in social ostracism or spiritual condemnation. Cults exert control over nearly all aspects of members' lives, from diet and dress to personal relationships and daily routines. Strict adherence to these behaviors is enforced, and noncompliance is met with punishment or expulsion. Comparison. Both systems impose strict behavioral norms, using social and spiritual consequences to force conformity and control over its members. 6. Doctrine over personal experience. Modern Christianity. Adherents are often taught to prioritize religious doctrine over personal experience or scientific understanding. Questions about and doubts are frequently redirected back to scripture or religious authority, discouraging independent thought. Cults. Cults teach that their doctrines must supersede personal experiences and external information. Members are conditioned to distrust their own perceptions and rely solely on the group's teaching. Comparison. Both prioritize doctrines over individual experience, discouraging personal insight and critical thinking in favor of prescribed beliefs. 7. Financial exploitation. Modern Christianity. Many churches require tithing and donations, sometimes pressuring members to give beyond their means, with the promise of spiritual rewards. Wealth accumulation by religious leaders and institutions can be significant, with funds often used for extravagant purposes. Cults. Cults frequently exploit members financially, demanding large donations or free labor, enriching the leaders while the members remain economically dependent. Financial contributions are framed as essential for spiritual growth or communal survival. Comparison. Both systems can engage in financial exploitation using spiritual promises to justify economic demands on their members. 8. Versus them mentality. Tribalism. Modern Christianity. Many Christian groups foster an us versus them mentality, viewing themselves as morally superior and under the threat from secular society or other religions. This mindset can lead to a siege mentality, where outsiders are viewed with suspicion or hostility. Cults. Cults often cultivate a strong versus us versus them mentality, portraying the outside world as dangerous or corrupt. This creates a sense of unity and reinforces dependence on the group for safety and truth. Comparison. Both systems use us versus them mentality to create group cohesion and justify isolation from broader society. Conclusion. By examining these comparisons, it becomes evident that many characteristics commonly associated with cults can also be found within modern Christianity. The centralization of authority, exclusive truth claims, emotional manipulation, social isolation, behavioral control, prioritization of doctrine over personal experience, financial exploitation, and us versus them mentality are all traits that can be present in both systems. This analysis suggests that the elements of cult-like behavior can be identified in mainstream religious practices, challenging the distinction often made between cults and established religions. 22. Child abuse. Hyper-Sane analysis. Religion, cognitive dissonance, ethics, and indoctrination in diet and children. The cognitive dissonance of religious belief. What is cognitive dissonance? Okay, let's define cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is a psychological phenomenon that occurs when an individual experiences conflict between their beliefs, values, or behaviors. This conflict often leads to mental discomfort, actual pain, prompting the individual to seek resolution by altering their beliefs or behaviors to achieve consistency. Empirical evidence of cognitive dissonance in religion. Conflicting doctrines and scientific understanding. Faith and evidence. Faith versus evidence. Many religious beliefs require faith in doctrines that contradict empirical evidence. For example, creationist views conflict with scientific consensus on evolution and the age of the earth. Believers must reconcile these contradictions, often leading to cognitive dissonance. Moral teachings versus modern ethics. Religious moral teachings, such as those regarding gender roles or LGBTQ plus rights, often clash with contemporary ethical standards. Believers may struggle to align their faith with modern views on equality and human rights. Personal experiences versus religious teachings. Suffering and the problem of evil. The existence of suffering and evil poses a significant challenge to the belief in a benevolent and omnipotent deity. Personal experiences of tragedy can exacerbate this dissonance, leading individuals to question their faith. Divergent religious practices. Different denominations within the same religion may hold contradictory beliefs and practices. Believers navigating these differences may experience cognitive dissonance as they encounter divergent interpretations of their faith. Resolution attempts and mental discomfort. Rationalization. Believers may attempt to rationalize conflicting beliefs, such as interpreting religious texts metaphorically rather than literally. Compartmentalization. Separating faith from other areas of life, such as science or ethics, allows individuals to maintain contradictory beliefs without directly confronting the dissonance. Selective exposure. Seeking out information in communities that reinforce their beliefs helps individuals avoid cognitive dissonance by minimizing exposure to contradictory evidence. Conclusion. Empirically speaking, religious belief often involves cognitive dissonance as individuals struggle to reconcile conflicting doctrines, scientific understanding, and personal experiences. Mental discomfort arising from this dissonance can lead to various coping mechanisms that further complicate the pursuit of truth and consistency. 23. The ethics of indoctrination and diet in children. Indoctrination as child abuse, brain development and vulnerability, neuroplasticity. Children's brains are highly malleable and impressionable, making them particularly vulnerable to indoctrination. Early exposure to rigid beliefs can limit their capacity for critical thinking and independent thought. Psychological impact. Indoctrination can instill fear, guilt, and dependency, leading to long term psychological consequences. Children taught to fear eternal damnation or divine retribution may experience anxiety and stress. Consequentialist perspective, harm principle. Indoctrination causes harm by impeding children's intellectual and emotional development. It limits their ability to explore diverse perspectives and make informed decisions. Autonomy and consent. Children cannot consent to religious indoctrination, making it an imposition on their autonomy. Ethical education should empower children to make their own choices as they mature. Conclusion. Indoctrinating children before their brains are fully developed constitutes a form of child abuse, harms their intellectual and emotional growth, undermines their autonomy, and imposes belief without informed consent. Feeding children meat, health and ethical implications. Health risks. Cancer and chronic disease. Empirical studies link the consumption of processed and red meat to increased risk of cancer, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. Feeding children meat exposes them to these health risks. Nutritional alternatives. Plant-based diets can provide all essential nutrients without associated health risk of meat consumption. Educating children about these alternatives supports their long-term health. Ethical considerations. Animal suffering. Raising animals for meat involves significant animal suffering and ethical concerns. Teaching children to consume meat without considering these implications perpetuates a cycle of harm. Environmental impact. Meat production contributes to environmental degradation, including deforestation, greenhouse gas emissions, water pollution. Instilling dietary habits that harm the planet undermines efforts to promote sustainability. Conclusion. Feeding children meat, given its health risk and ethical implications, can be considered a form of child abuse. It jeopardizes their health, perpetuates animal suffering, and contributes to environmental harm. Ethical education should promote awareness of these issues and empower children to make informed dietary choices. Combined conclusion. From a hyper-sane and consequentialist perspective, both religious indoctrination and feeding children meat can be seen as forms of child abuse. Religious indoctrination impedes children's intellectual and emotional development, causing cognitive dissonance and limiting their autonomy. Feeding children meat exposes them to significant health risks and perpetuates ethical and environmental. Ethical education should prioritize critical thinking, informed consent, and the promotion of health and sustainability, empowering children to grow into an autonomous, conscientious individuals.